The debt ceiling deal cleared its biggest hurdle in the Republican-controlled House Wednesday night, passing 314 to 117, with 71 Republicans and 46 Democrats voting against the bill. It's now off to the Senate, which has until Monday to sign off. I want to bring in economist Kevin Hassett. He's a former senior advisor to President Donald Trump. Kevin, always good to have you.
Great to be here, Simone.
Look, we know the Senate moves slow by design, and we also know that there are a few senators, at least, who want to propose amendments. What are your predictions on how this plays out?
Right. Well, I think that the thing has to pass as is. If they were to amend the bill, then they would have to go back to a conference committee in the House, which would, then split the difference between the House and the Senate bill. And, we're running against the clock here with the debt limit. My view is there won't be any amendments and it's going to pass. And that everybody knows it's going to pass, just like everybody knew it was going to pass the House yesterday. And the reason why that's relevant is that if you know something's going to pass, then, basically the speaker or the majority leader will basically, or minority leader, will look the other way if you vote against the bill. The bottom line is it's going to pass. And so if you need to, cover your right side as you're going into a primary challenge or something and want to vote against it, then nobody begrudges that. And so I think that the media has been making a whole lot out of all the no votes, and then even the people like Lindsey Graham who say they're not going to vote for it in the Senate. But that's just like kabuki theater. Everybody knows the thing's going to pass, and the people who are saying no are just doing so for political reasons. That's it. If we really needed their vote to get the bill through, then we would probably get it.
Taking the bill as it is, what would you say goes in the win column for the GOP?
Sure. There are a whole bunch of wins in this for the GOP. I think that the biggest win is that they're cutting spending by, there have been various estimates, but it looks like it's going to be about $2 trillion over 10 years, smaller deficit. And, if Kevin McCarthy had proposed a $2 trillion debt reduction bill all by itself, then it would have a zero chance of passing, with the Democrats in the Senate and Biden in the White House. And so to take something that had to happen, the debt limit, and use it as a vehicle to get a policy win of $2 trillion reduction in spending, it's a big win for him. The other big win is work requirements, that they've pretty heavily strengthened work requirements for people who are getting food stamps, and it's basically you're going to help get people reattached to society. There's a lot of evidence that work requirements that make people actually better off because they're happier once they get back and get a job. And so the work requirements, again, they're something that never, ever, ever would have passed a Democratic Congress if you put it as a standalone bill. But by combining it with the debt limit, then they were able to get it through. And that's really why, like when you and I talked about this a while ago, I was saying, yeah, for sure they should bargain over the debt limit because they're going to get some policy concessions from the Democrats. And sure enough, here we are.
Yeah, we would put the work requirements into the loss column for Democrats especially. What would you say goes in the loss column for the GOP on this one?
I don't think that there are a lot of losses, really, but I guess one thing is that the spending reduction is pretty darn small, and spending is really out of control. And so it's a step in the right direction, but the Republicans that are voting against it are arguing that McCarthy had a lot more leverage in this, and he should have been able to get more spending concessions than he did. And so, for example, is something that a lot of people are talking about is there's this, massive increase in funding for the IRS to hire auditors to come around and harass us all. And it was a top priority for many Republicans to, pull those funds out. And McCarthy wasn't able to do that. And so I guess you would call that a win for the Democrats. They want to harass you with IRS agents and audits, and they're still going to be able to do that.
Well, Kevin, we're still talking about, the national debt here, and we know that the CBO says that increased funding for the IRS is going to decrease deficits. So that would be good for the overall conversation of trying to bring down this debt issue, correct?
If you think that that's what's going to happen, but there's this thing that's called the tax gap that everybody in Washington that does policy knows about. And the tax gap is an estimate by the Joint Tax Committee of how much tax we collect compared to how much tax is owed. And every year they say we collect about $1 trillion less than is owed because people are doing things, that they're not really adhering to the law and so on. But whenever people go after closing the tax gap, they fail. There's a long record of that. And so sure, we're going to have, 80,000 new IRS agents trying to close the tax gap. But if they do close the tax gap, then they'll be the first ones to be successful. It's sort of like closing the tax gap is as successfully as likely as sort of, I don't know, invading Russia in winter or some of the classic, blunders. It's just like you can spend a lot of money on it, but it turns out that when you take a close look, then the people don't actually owe the taxes that the IRS thought, and they waste a lot of time on the audit.
Compromise has become a bit of a bad word in Washington. I would say this bill proves that compromise is still alive and well, at least when the fate of the country's economy is at risk. Does this come at a cost for President Biden or McCarthy, though?
No, not at all. In fact, everybody kind of knows that this is one of those things that you got to compromise on, and people have done so over and over and over again. I would say that the winners here are both McCarthy and Biden, which is what happens when there's a compromise. For McCarthy, the victory is that he showed that he can navigate a difficult, House of Representatives with a small majority and then get something done, get some real policy concessions that showed really great leadership on his part. And for President Biden, as he heads into the general, I think Americans are desperate for a candidate that can work well with others, that, isn't so extreme as perhaps Biden has been in the first couple of years. And so having a kind of moderate compromise bill that's supported by Republicans and Democrats will help Biden tell the story that he's the guy who can work with the other side and, not just run far to the left. The problem is his record for the first 2 years was opposite that. But this kind of switch is something that we've seen before. You might recall that Bill Clinton, basically lost the House because of Hillary Care, and because he took over in the first 2 years, was running way to the left. And then Newt Gingrich came in and, made a lot of compromise bills with Clinton that made Clinton look like a reasonable moderate. And Clinton won re-election in a landslide. And so I think that Biden's probably looking at that, Clinton-Gingrich history and thinking, oh, this is kind of a win for me, too.
Multiple members of the conservative wing are still calling for McCarthy's job over this. Do you think that has any steam at this point?
I think that they'll continue to call for his job, but they don't have a replacement, and so no, McCarthy's safe. And again, there's going to be a small number of people who have very extreme negative views about, like, we should have, just like if you go past the debt limit, then the U.S., has a balanced budget amendment basically effectively because there's no increase in debt limit. They can't borrow. But what that means is that you were defaulting on our debt. We can't make interest payments and so on. It's a risk to global financial markets that's really unfathomable. And it seems like there are a few radicals that kind of want us to test the waters on that and are going to be disappointed if we don't. But I think most House members understand that in a narrow majority, you need a speaker who can get the best deal possible. And McCarthy's deal is really, quite a bit better than even I anticipated a few weeks ago.
Kevin Hassett, former senior advisor to President Donald Trump. It's always a pleasure having you on. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Great to be back.
Thanks for watching. In this time of media mistrust, Straight Arrow News is on a mission to bring you unbiased, fact-based reporting. So to make sure you get journalism you trust, like and subscribe to Straight Arrow News below. It goes a long way in telling YouTube we're the kind of news you want to see more of. And for all of our content, go to our website at straightarrownews.com.